Now I have the full transcript. Let me write the new story. I grew up thinking forgiveness was something you gave to protect yourself, not the other person. It took me 62 years and a DNA test to understand why. My name is Harriet. That's the only name that matters here. Not my married name, not the name that used to appear on the society pages of the Charleston Courier, not the name my mother-in-law called me under her breath when she thought I couldn't hear. Just Harriet, the girl from Summerville, South Carolina, who grew up in a 3-bedroom house with a leaking roof and a mother who stretched a grocery budget the way other women stretch silk. Carefully, without tearing. I was 31 when my daughter was born. I was 31 when my husband looked at that baby, 7 pounds 2 ounces, the most perfect thing I'd ever seen in my life, and told the nurse he wasn't signing anything until he had proof. Proof of what? I asked him. My voice was still raw from 16 hours of labor. I thought I had misheard. He didn't answer me. He looked at his brother instead, and his brother looked at the floor. That was the moment I should have understood. But I was exhausted and bleeding and holding a baby, and the human mind protects itself from truths it isn't ready to carry. I met my husband at a fundraiser for the Children's Hospital in downtown Charleston. I was there representing the non-profit where I worked, grief counseling services for low-income families. He was there because his family had donated the pediatric wing, the Aldridge family, 3rd-generation commercial real estate, the kind of old Southern money that gets called distinguished in the newspaper and ruthless in the back rooms where deals actually get made. He was tall and broad-shouldered, and he laughed with his whole chest, the way men do when they've never had reason to make themselves small. He introduced himself, learned I worked with grieving children, and spent the next 40 minutes asking me questions no man at that kind of party had ever thought to ask me before. What do you say to a 6-year-old who has just lost their mother? How do you help someone grieve something they don't have language for yet? I fell in love with the version of him I met that night. I wish I could say I knew he wasn't real. We dated for 2 years. His family was cordial during the courtship. Cool, but cordial. His mother shook my hand with 2 fingers and said I had a lovely smile. His father, a heavy-set man with grey eyes and a handshake like a vice grip, told me I reminded him of someone without ever saying who. His brother was the friendliest of all of them. He called me by my name, laughed at my jokes, refilled my glass at dinner before I thought to ask. My mother told me to be careful. Rich families don't open their gates, she said. They just make you think they have. I told her she was being old-fashioned. We married in September, on the Aldridge family property, an estate outside Charleston with live oaks and Spanish moss and a pond that reflected the sky so perfectly it looked like heaven was below you instead of above. My dress was simple. The guest list was not. 400 people, most of whom I had never met, all of whom seemed to be watching me the way people watch a new exhibit at a museum. Curious, cautious, not entirely sure I belonged behind the glass. The first year of marriage was lonely in a way I had no words for. My husband travelled constantly for work. I worked my non-profit job during the day and spent evenings alone in a house so large it had rooms I forgot existed. My mother-in-law would stop by sometimes, unannounced, and walk through the house making small adjustments, moving a vase, straightening a frame, as if she were conducting an inspection I would never quite pass. My brother-in-law was different. He visited often, always with a reason, dropping off paperwork for my husband, checking on a property nearby, passing through. He was easy company. Too easy, I realize now. I never felt on guard around him the way I did with the rest of the family. He made me feel like I had an ally in that house. I got pregnant 14 months into the marriage. My husband seemed pleased, genuinely, warmly pleased, in the way he was sometimes when he forgot to perform. He put his hand on my stomach in the ultrasound room, and his eyes went soft. I thought, this is real. Whatever is hollow between us, this is real. The pregnancy was hard. Nausea through the 5th month, a back that ached like something was pulling it apart from the inside, and a loneliness so thick I sometimes sat at the kitchen table and cried into my coffee for no reason I could name. My husband was travelling more, not less. My mother-in-law seemed to find my condition mildly inconvenient. My brother-in-law checked on me regularly. He brought groceries once when I mentioned I wasn't feeling up to going out. He sat with me on the porch one evening, and we talked for 2 hours about childhood, about family, about what it means to belong somewhere. He opened a bottle of wine, a special one he'd brought from the family cellar, he said, a vintage their father had put aside for celebrations, and poured us each a glass. I shouldn't, I said. I was 7 months along by then. 1 sip, he said. It's tradition. My father would want you too. I don't know why I agreed. I think I was tired of being the outsider who didn't know the traditions. I think I wanted just once to feel like one of them. I took 2 sips, maybe 3. I don't remember the rest of that evening. I don't remember him leaving. I woke up the next morning on the couch with a blanket over me and a headache that pressed behind my eyes like something trying to get out. I told myself I had fallen asleep. I told myself the wine had hit me harder because of the pregnancy. I told myself a lot of things that morning. My daughter was born 6 weeks later, 3 weeks early, in a delivery room at USC Medical Center. I called my husband from the cab on the way there because I didn't know who else to call. He arrived 2 hours after she was born. He walked in with his brother. I remember thinking it was strange. Why would he bring his brother to the hospital at that moment? But then I saw their faces, and the strangeness settled into something colder. She came early, my husband said. Not hello, not how are you, not look at her. 3 weeks, I said. The doctor said it's within normal range. She's healthy. She's perfect. Do you want to hold her? He didn't move toward me. I've been doing the math, he said. I stared at him. What math? The dates. His jaw was tight. When I was travelling, when I wasn't here. I don't understand what you're saying. His brother looked up at the ceiling. I want a paternity test, my husband said, before I sign anything. The room went very quiet. My daughter was asleep against my chest, her mouth making small movements like she was dreaming about something warm. Get out, I said. Harriet, I said, get out of this room right now. They didn't get out. The nurse eventually came in, and then the attending physician, a soft-spoken man in his 50s who read the situation in about 4 seconds and asked the 2 of them to step into the hallway. He leaned over my bed with careful eyes and said, "We can arrange a test. It's your right. Do you consent?" "Yes," I said, because I had nothing to hide, because I wanted them to see what I knew. What none of us knew yet was what the test would actually find. The results came back 4 days later. I was still in the hospital. My daughter had some trouble feeding, and they wanted to monitor her. My husband's lawyer called before my husband did, which told me everything I needed to know about what our marriage had become. The results were not what anyone expected. My daughter's DNA did not match my husband, but it matched someone in his immediate family, a first-degree male relative, father, brother. The genetic counselor explained it to me twice. The second time I asked her to write it down. My husband arrived an hour later. He was alone this time, which surprised me. He sat in the chair next to my bed and did not speak for a long time. "I need you to tell me," he finally said, "that you never had a relationship with my brother." "I never had a relationship with your brother," I said. "I never had a relationship with anyone except you." He closed his eyes. "The evening he came to the house," I said slowly, "when you were in Atlanta. He brought wine. From your father's cellar," he said. I took a few sips. I woke up the next morning and didn't remember him leaving. My husband sat very still. A long time passed. "He's done this before," he finally said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't know. I found out. 3 years ago, something happened with a woman at one of the family properties. It was handled. My father handled it, asked questions. I didn't want to know. He put his face in his hands. I didn't want to know. I looked at my daughter sleeping in the hospital bassinet beside me. Her fingers were curled like small ferns. You have to help me, I said. Whatever you feel about me, whatever this marriage is or isn't, you have to help me. He raised his head. His eyes were red. Yes, he said, I will. The lawyer my husband helped me find was a woman named Caroline, based in Colombia, a former prosecutor who specialized in sexual assault and civil litigation. She had short silver hair and a voice like a judge, and she looked at my intake file for about 90 seconds before she said, How long are you prepared to fight? As long as it takes, I said. Good answer. Caroline filed a criminal complaint against my brother-in-law with the Charleston County Sheriff's Office within 2 weeks. She also began building a civil case in parallel. The Aldridge family's response was immediate and brutal. Their attorney sent a letter suggesting I was mentally unstable, that my account was a fabrication motivated by the impending divorce, that my husband would be seeking full custody on grounds of emotional unfitness. I read that letter sitting at my mother's kitchen table in Somerville, nursing my daughter, and I felt something go quiet in me. Not broken quiet, decided quiet, the kind of quiet that comes when you stop being afraid. Let them try, I told Caroline. My husband, to his credit, did not flinch. He gave a sworn statement corroborating my account of the evening in question. He disclosed the previous incident 3 years earlier. The woman at the family property whose settlement agreement Caroline tracked down inside of a month. Her name was Valerie. She was living in Colombia now, working as a phlebotomist, raising a son who was 4 years old. When Caroline called Valerie, Valerie didn't hang up. She listened. Then she said, What took you so long to find me? There was a third woman. Her name was Ruth. She'd worked as a property manager for one of the Aldridge holdings. She'd signed a non-disclosure agreement 7 years ago for an amount of money that her attorney at the time had told her was fair and generous, which is another way of saying she'd been too frightened and too alone to negotiate. 3 women. 1 man, a family that had spent years mistaking their wealth for immunity. The district attorney assigned to the case was a young woman who had been in office less than a year and had exactly the kind of ambition that made the Aldridge family nervous. She told Caroline she believed the case was prosecutable. She told Caroline she wasn't afraid of political pressure. She was right on both counts. My brother-in-law was arrested on a Thursday morning. The news broke before noon. By evening, it was the lead story on every local station in South Carolina and had made the national wire. The Aldridge family's response was to go silent, which is what families like that do when silence is the last card they have left. My father-in-law appeared on the local news once briefly to say the family was praying for all parties involved. He looked old. He looked like a man watching something collapse that he'd spent decades propping up. My mother-in-law did not appear publicly at all. Her attorney released a statement. It said the family would cooperate fully with the investigation while maintaining faith in the justice system. What it meant was, we are calculating how much of this we can survive. The trial began 11 months after my daughter's birth. I sat in that courtroom for 3 weeks and watched the jury watch my brother-in-law, and I thought about my grandmother's house in Somerville, about my mother's stretched grocery budgets, about the girl who grew up believing that if she worked hard enough and loved honestly enough and made herself good enough, the world would eventually be fair. The world is not fair. I know that now. But sometimes, rarely, imperfectly, it can be made to be. The jury came back in a day and a half. Guilty. Aggravated criminal sexual conduct. Administering a controlled substance without consent. The judge sentenced him to 35 years. He will be an old man before he breathes free air, if he ever does. My marriage ended the same month the verdict came in. My husband and I signed the papers at a law office on a Tuesday afternoon and shook hands afterward in the parking lot, which sounds cold but was actually one of the most honest moments we'd had in years. We looked at each other like people have survived something together and know they cannot survive each other. He has been a good father. That surprised me, and then it stopped surprising me because I think he needed to be. I think he needed to prove something to himself that had nothing to do with DNA and everything to do with the kind of man he was going to choose to be on the other side of all of it. My daughter is 11 now. She has her own opinions about everything: her bedtime, the best flavor of ice cream, which library books deserve 5 stars and which ones were overhyped. She has her father's laugh and my mother's stubbornness, and something all her own that I don't have a word for yet, only a feeling, the way you feel standing outside on a clear night when the sky opens up and reminds you how large everything is. She knows she is loved. That's what she knows. The rest is a conversation for when she's older, and I will have it with her honestly, the way I wish someone had been honest with me. I run a small advocacy organization now out of an office in Colombia. We help survivors of drug-facilitated assault navigate the legal system, connecting them with attorneys, coordinating with law enforcement, providing support during the months and years when a case moves at the speed of cold molasses and despair starts to feel reasonable. We've worked with over 200 women in 9 years. Some of their cases made headlines. Most did not. The ones that didn't matter just as much. Valerie serves on our board of directors. She brings her son to the holiday party every year and he runs around the office stealing cookies off the refreshment table, and I think you are going to be okay. Both of you. Ruth testified at a state legislative hearing last spring on behalf of a bill that would extend the statute of limitations on drug-facilitated assault cases in South Carolina. The bill passed. She called me from the State House steps and cried for about 4 minutes, and then laughed and said she couldn't believe a piece of paper could feel like that. I told her I could. People ask me sometimes, women mostly, women who are in the middle of something they don't know how to get out of. They ask me if I was scared, if I ever thought about giving up, if I ever looked at the size of that family and their money and their lawyers and their connections and thought, this is too much. I cannot do this. And I tell them yes. Every day for about the first 6 months, I thought it was too much. But I had a daughter asleep in a hospital bassinet, with her fingers curled like small ferns. And I had a mother in Somerville who stretched budgets and never tore anything. And I had the memory, or the absence of a memory, of a Tuesday night in my own home when someone decided I didn't matter enough to ask. I mattered. I have always mattered. It just took me standing in a courtroom and saying it out loud for the world to agree. I'm 62 years old. I have a daughter who argues with me about library books, and a mother who still calls every Sunday morning, and an office full of women who found their way to me because they needed someone who had already walked through the dark part and come out the other side knowing where the light was. You cannot take that from me. No settlement, no NDA, no team of attorneys in expensive suits can reach back through everything that has already happened and unmake what it made me. That's what they never understand. People who use power as a weapon, they think breaking you is permanent. They think if they are large enough and loud enough and willing to spend enough money on silence, the story ends there. The story never ends there. If this story reached you, if some part of it sat in your chest the way truth does when it finds the right place, I want to hear from you. Tell me where you're listening from. Tell me what it meant to you. Leave it in the comments below because those words matter more than you know. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. You might not know why they need it. You might not know what they're carrying. Share it anyway. I'll see you in the next story. I've thought a lot about cause and effect over the years. Not in any religious sense. I'm not talking about cosmic scales or divine punishment. I'm talking about something simpler and harder than that. I'm talking about the plain, stubborn fact that what people do has weight. It lands somewhere. It always lands somewhere. My brother-in-law made a choice. He made it more than once with more than one woman across more than a decade. And for a long time, that choice landed on us, on Valerie, on Ruth, on me, while he walked free and the family kept the gates closed and the money kept the silence bought. That's how it works when power goes unchecked. The weight gets redistributed to the people with the least ability to carry it. But here's what I know now that I didn't know then. You cannot keep redistributing that weight forever. At some point it accumulates in the wrong place. At some point some woman with nothing left to lose and a newborn in her arms decides she's done carrying it. That was me. That was Valerie when she opened the door and didn't close it. That was Ruth standing on the steps of the State House with her voice shaking and her chin up. What I want to say about ethics, about the kind of moral backbone that doesn't require a rule book or a congregation, is that it is built quietly, in ordinary moments, long before you need it. I didn't know I had it until Caroline sat across from me and asked how long I was prepared to fight. But it had been building my whole life, in my mother's kitchen, in the grief counselling sessions I ran with children who had lost everything and somehow kept showing up. In my grandmother's warnings, I was too young and too hopeful to hear clearly, but that lodged in me anyway and waited. Character is not something you perform. It's something you've already been choosing, slowly, in the accumulation of small decisions no one was watching, and intelligence. I don't mean grades or credentials. I mean the kind of clear-eyed thinking that keeps you from being paralyzed by fear. Intelligence is what Valerie used when she listened instead of hanging up. It's what Ruth used when she walked into a legislative hearing and translated her worst experience into something that could change a law. It's what I used when I stopped trying to make sense of what had happened to me and started asking, what can I actually do about it? Those are two different questions. The first one keeps you in the hospital room forever. The second one moves you forward. Resilience is the one people talk about most, and they usually make it sound like armor, like you get tough enough that things stop hurting. That's not what it is. I still think about that Tuesday evening in my own house. I still have mornings where the weight of it sits on my chest before I've had coffee. Resilience is not the absence of that weight. It's the decision, made again and again, to get up anyway, to keep the appointment, to answer the phone when a stranger might need you. My daughter is 11. She doesn't know the full story yet, but she watches how I move through the world, how I show up for work, how I talk about hard things, how I don't flinch when something is difficult. Children learn ethics the same way they learn language, by immersion, long before anyone explains the rules. I want her to understand when she's ready that what happened to me was not the end of anything. It was the beginning of everything I actually built. That's the thing about the worst chapters. They have a way of clarifying what you're made of, if you're willing to stay in them long enough to find out. I stayed, and I found out.